and the connect that one saw in the history can also be felt in the present as we see warmth, bonhomie, camaraderie between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. He arrived in
The first small structure is called Draupadi Rath. It looks like a hermit's abode with a hut-like thatched roof with a curved effect. The shrine is dedicated to Goddess Durga. In the foreground is the mount of the goddess, the standing lion. And this is the Nakul Sehdev Ratha. It is apsidal in its shape. There are no figure carvings on this Ratha, but its beauty lies in its simplicity. Next to it stands a life-size monolithic elephant. This is a fine example of Pallava imagination and propensity for experimentation. And this is the Bhim Ratha, or the chariot. This is the largest of the 5 structures, with a roof that is shaped like a country wagon. It's interesting how these Rathas are named after Pandavas, epic heroes from the epic the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata, which dates back to circa 5th century BC, mentions China. So we know that our ties with China go back thousands of years. The Yudhishthir or Dharmaraj Ratha is the tallest structure. It depicts the maturing of temple architecture and is the most refined of the 5 structures. It became the basis of the temples to come later during the reign of the Cholas and others thereafter. The base of this shrine is supported by carved pillars with lion bases and corner supports. There are many lifelike sculptures on the corners of this shrine that depict various manifestations of Lord Shiva. The 2 leaders pause for a moment to admire these great works of art. One of the greatest of Chinese poets is Li Bai, who lived in the 8th century. His words resonate on this occasion. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. In only such a meditative state could the artists have created such works of beauty, and the beauty in turn takes one into a meditative state. The relations between India and China go back at least 2000 years. The Tamil and Chinese interaction is at least 13 centuries old. So it is quite easy to imagine travelers coming here to admire these very sights, to wonder at these structures in the ancient times, just as we admire them today. Perhaps Hyun Sung, who was here during the Pallava period, did walk here with his friends and admire the sheer beauty of these structures. These beautiful structures have been left unfinished. No one really knows why. Li Bao has said, "No one understands now those who could hear a song this deeply vanished long ago." The first records of contact between China and India were written during the 2nd century BC. Buddhism was transmitted from India to China in the 1st century AD. Trade relations via the Silk Road acted as economic contact between the two regions. There is a 1,000-year-old history between Chuanzhou and Tamil Nadu. Tamil traders lived there during the Song and Yuan dynasties and built temples there. The most famous being the Chedian temple, which has a beautiful deity which is called by a different name in China. But archaeologists believe that the style of that deity is exactly similar to the kind of work that was being done at the same time in India. In the 1930s, dozens of stones showing perfectly rendered images of the god Narasimha, the man-lion avatar of Vishnu, were unearthed in Chuanzhou. Chanakya, in circa 350 BC, who was the Prime Minister of the Mauryan Empire, refers to Chinese silk as Chinam Sukha, or the Chinese silk dress, and Chinapatta for the Chinese silk bundle in his Arthashastra. In the records of the grand historian Zhang Qian, in 113 BC, and Sima Qian in 145 BC make references to Shendu, which may have been referring to the Indus Valley, originally known as Sindhu in Sanskrit. Of the many interesting similarities and commonalities between India and China is sugar, which was first developed in China. And when it came to India, we called it chini, meaning something which is referred to as Chinese. And even today, when we talk about sweetness in life or in relationships, we talk about chini. The Cholas maintained a good relationship with the Chinese. An entire treasure trove of ancient Chinese coins have been found in the Chola homeland. Many sources describe the great sage Bodhidharma, the founder of the Zen school of Buddhism in China, as a prince of the Pallava dynasty. During the 8th century, the astronomical tables of science by the Indian astronomer and mathematician Aryabhat were translated into the Chinese astronomical and mathematical book of the Treatise of Astrology of the Qian era. And of all the beautiful Chinese things that have become part of the Indian tradition are the Chinese fishing nets in Kerala. They were probably introduced in the 14th century and today are a major tourist attraction. People come from all across the world to look at them. These structures here, the rathas, date back to the 7th century and are attributed to the reign of King Mahendravarman and his son Narasimhavarman in the 7th century of the Pallava kingdom. These temple structures were never consecrated, due to which some historians even speculate that this could be a training ground of sorts to create templates for future endeavor for creating larger templates. This is the second informal meeting between President Xi and the Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi. The greenery all around and these boulders, which have been so beautifully chiseled into these shrines, remind me of the words of Li Po. You ask me why I make my home in the mountain forest, and I smile and I'm silent, and even my soul remains quiet. It lives in the other world, which no one owns. You ask me why I dwell amidst these jade green hills. I smile. No words can tell the stillness in my heart. I live in the other world, one that lies beyond the human. Art and culture, science and economics have always gone hand in hand between India and China. Five of these rathas are present here, of which 4 are linear, whereas the 5th, which is the Nakul Sehdev Ratha, stands apart. The elephant and the lion standing close together, almost lifelike. A delegation to China was sent as long back as 1,000 years ago by the great Chola Emperor Rajaraja. A Shiva temple in China and the use of Chinese umbrellas centuries ago shed light on ancient links between Tamil Nadu and the Dragon Land. In fact, one finds similarity in the lions that we see here in many of the temples of Tamil Nadu to the dragons of China. These are visuals of the Dharmaraj Ratha. This informal meeting reminds one of September 2014 when the two leaders met in Ahmedabad on the banks of the Sabarmati River. They met last year in Wuhan, an ancient city which at the same time is modern in China. And of course, and now this meeting in Mahabalipuram. These informal meetings where the two leaders meet as friends, work towards solidifying the India-China relationship. The Pancha Pandava Rathas are simply spectacular. They are monoliths, that is, they are made out of a single living rock like many of the other structures in this area. The Pallavas were pioneers in this kind of architecture. President Xi and the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi circumambulating these structures. So we see the Dharmaraj Ratha, which has beautiful depictions of Shiva in various forms. The structures with their beautiful sculptures and personifications of Lord Shiva, almost lifelike, as they depict Shiva in various manifestations such as Gangadhar, Nataraj, and there in the corner is Ardhanarishwar, the combined form of Lord Shiva and Goddess Parvati. It is the ultimate divine manifestation of the masculine and the feminine in the same deity. And we see Lord Shiva's mount Nandi behind the beautifully carved Arjun Ratha and those boulders that were left incomplete, and no one knows why. Perhaps in the unfinished lies great potentiality. Just like old songs and old music can create new melodies for the future. The Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi and President Xi moving towards the beautifully decorated gate as he sees off President Xi from this spot. A firm handshake for a firm friendship. As the carcade leaves this spot, they move towards the famous shore temple of Mahabalipuram, which is also known as Jalashayan, or one that reclines by the water. It is also believed that the shore temple was a landmark for the navigation of ships and a haven for seafarers.
The most iconic image of Mahabalipuram are the twin shore temples, magnificently located by the sea. The taller east-facing temple, Kshatriya Simha Palaveshwara Graham, has a 5-story Vimanam. The west-facing smaller Rajasimha Palaveshwara Graham has a 3-story Vimanam. With a variety of fascinating sculptures, most faded by passage of time, but most of it has fallen, and only the lower portions of the walls remain. A magnificent series of seated Nandis decorate the outer edges of this wall. One legend says that gods themselves were jealous of the beauty of these temples. Mahabalipuram is not only a grand living museum of architecture and sculpture, but also a perennial puzzle delighting tourist, historian and Rasika alike.
Is to showcase the rich cultural diversity, to understand the different aspects of history, Prime Minister Modi, strength. S, spirituality. T, tradition, relationship. E, entertainment. बातचीत करते हुए, आगे बढ़ते हुए, trending of partnership is to showcase the rich cultural diversity, to understand the different aspects of history